So this video was a bit of an unexpected one. Some of you may know that I'm involved with a left-wing creators group called We Create Together, and as such, I believe it's important for left creators to support each other as much as possible. I lurk in a number of left groups on social media, one of which is a group for left-wing gamers, and in this group I saw a post that asked, could you folks recommend any leftist game streamers or content creators? Naturally I thought, hey, I'm one of those. Sort of, and raised my hand before realising that what was probably wanted was channels that did playthroughs and reviews as opposed to the sort of ideology waffle I normally do. As it turns out, the post was left by a member of Strangelet Games, a Finnish indie game developer that was looking for content creators to try out the demo for All in the Game, and to help spread the word. So I fired the game up, and well, I got lucky. Because this game has some stuff to talk about. It's important to state that I'm not being paid for this video, I'm playing a free demo, a demo that anyone can access on Steam, and I recommend you do, and I've received no compensation for this video. All thoughts and opinions are my own, unless I am directly quoting someone, in which case I will say so. With that out of the way, let's take a quick look at All in the Game, talk about what it does, what it doesn't do, and why that is interesting. All in the Game is about crime. Specifically, crime that you will control and manipulate to grow your underworld empire using the framework of a traditional 4X style game. The 4X's being explore, expand, exploit and exterminate. It is a turn-based strategy game that pits you against other players to dominate a city map using a vast array of characters, weapons, commodities and skills to give you the upper hand as your opposite numbers try to cut your legs from under you. To use the official description from Steam, it is described thusly. All in the Game is a turn-based strategy and management game where you start off with a small criminal gang, claim your very own street corner, start expanding your territories, become rich through illegal means and launder your money by investing into more or less legit businesses. Now, the game will be launching as early access, and the version I have played will not be the final edition by any means. But the one thing that was immediately apparent was that this game has depth. And by depth, I mean that I was almost paralysed by the sheer number of actions that I had available to me once I got into the game. But I am getting quite old, and this is a fairly familiar sensation for me these days. Much like with the Civilization series, the way you choose to dominate our city can involve a number of different win conditions, with players able to win via eliminating the opposition, earning enough clean cash, or by possessing more than 50% of the territories on the map. Any kind of organised crime requires violence, money and power, and this game recognises that despite only needing to meet one condition to win, you will need to learn how to utilise all of them, both to negate your enemy's efforts and to change your strategy should the need arise. It's also true that in order to successfully achieve any of these win conditions, you will need to carefully manage your personnel, build up your territory and develop an economic strategy to ensure that your gang has the funding to support its goals. You start the game with a lieutenant, who will be your means for influencing the world and enforcing your will. They are your means for capturing territory, getting hold of dirty cash via robberies, and for caving in the heads of those that oppose you. As well as your lieutenant, you will be able to recruit a few different members over the course of the game. So let's run through these now. First up are the workers, that act similarly to workers in the Tropico games if you've played those, acting as a sort of floating resource for amplifying the outputs of other characters or facilities, making their actions less risky, quicker or more lucrative, to quote the game's manual. They also handily act as meat shields for your main characters, though before you go recruiting as many as you can, do bear in mind that they cost money since workers got to get paid. There is also the fact that the more workers you have following you around, like some sort of West Side Story ensemble, the harder you will find it to stay hidden from notice. Then you have the different varieties of specialised lieutenants that are available to hire, such as the soldier, who unsurprisingly is a combat-focused character, as described in the game's manual. When someone inconvenient needs to get hurt or disappear, soldiers will take care of it. There isn't too much more to say about these guys, you get it. They are heavies, trigger people, thugs, etc. You get the picture. Then there is the middleman, A savvy operator whose primary focus is negotiation, whether it be in selling the less than legal goods that fell off a truck near your warehouse, or in convincing that young heavy that their future is best spent with your organisation as opposed to against it. Finally, you can also hire experts, specialists in using tech, gaining access to forbidden places, or in streamlining your organisation, reducing risk and increasing the chances of success. These different classes of lieutenant all come with different abilities that reflect their different focuses and can be further embellished with weapons and backup in the form of workers to improve their chance of surviving, succeeding and making your organisation the biggest and the best. So we have our archetypal pawns that we will send out into the world, but where should they go? Well, let's see. A big part of success in All in the Game is the acquisition and exploitation of territory. You can tool up your greasers with all the guns and finger-clicking workers you want, but this needs to be paid for, and to do this you will probably need a plan for getting your hands on some cold, hard cash on a regular basis. Of course you can just steal the money, but given the sheer number of possible uses of your character's time, having them just mug people outside the pub feels less than optimal. You do get protection money from all buildings within your territory, and that's great and all, but the real fun comes when you start looking into amenities and activities, which provide a complex and layered suite of options for building up your organisation with some tasty assets, sort of like when you throw down your houses and hotels in Monopoly. You can build additional facilities to provide additional income, to launder dirty money, or to provide a functional purpose, such as to increase storage space or to hide the bodies of those foolish enough to stray too close to your territory. You can even set up some drug production facilities or a space for dealing with the black market, which can be a vital area of focus. When attempting to build up your gang, you will likely be using the black market to acquire weapons, commodities and vital components. Within the black market, the prices are affected in a fairly realistic way, with repeat purchases of the same product raising the price for all involved in the game. Along with the game's limitations on purchases from the black market, this price mechanism acts as a way of creating an economy within the game that changes as it progresses. As well as incorporating the essence of supply and demand, this also allows other players to extrapolate information about what you might be doing that requires so many... hang on. Corpses? Well, that can't be right. Ah well, I guess what they say is true. Where there is a need, there is a ruthless free marketeer providing a service. There are times, of course, when being a slightly iffy real estate mogul or economic powerhouse will not be enough, and someone, not me mind, will have to put the boot in to protect your interests, or to take from someone else's. There are a number of demeanours, or as the game puts it, behaviours, that can affect the combat and sneaking potential of your lieutenants, ranging from shifty, which gives bonuses to stealth and defence, to aggressive, which gives bonuses to attack and allows your lieutenant to attack automatically upon discovering an enemy. Once you pair these behaviours with the choice in weapons, the presence of workers as backup, and the unlocking of perks as your characters progress, combat can become a complex and deep system that requires a lot of thought before risking your precious employees. Losing a key character at a crucial time can be the difference between total domination and abject failure. So we've had an admittedly whistle-stop tour of some of what makes All in the Game tick, but this is an InsideLeft video. Where's the wild speculation about intent and ideology? Worry not, folks. Here we go. Crime is always a fascinating subject to interrogate. And though my degree in criminology hasn't done much for my wider career, it did open my eyes to what crime actually is. Or can be, at any rate. Crime is a measurement of how well society is functioning. It tells you whether goods and services are being distributed correctly. It tells you whether people are being cared for. And it shows you exactly where the problems lie. When I put the question of why crime to game developer Anton of Strangelet Games, they told me that their initial inspiration for the game, and indeed the name, was HBO show The Wire.
You are a parasite who leeches off
just like you,
the
man.
culture of drugs. Excuse me? What?
I got the shotgun. You got the briefcase. It's on the game though, right?
The Wire famously depicted a number of characters in Baltimore on either side of the law, struggling to survive and establish a life for themselves in a situation where poverty, addiction, trauma and desperation were motivations on both sides of the badge. It was a remarkably balanced view of crime and criminal justice, and was famous for showing how each element feeds the other, leading to a sort of self-perpetuating cycle of poverty, law-breaking and state violence. Anton put this far more eloquently than me when they described how The Wire was chock full of social commentary about the failures of free market neoliberalism and the working class being consumed by capital. Taking the starting point of examining crime as a symptom as opposed to the outright disease, Strangelet then looked to work backwards and try to gamify organised crime, a feat attempted by a few games over the years, but not many at this kind of scale or in this level of detail. 2020 game Empire of Sin had a few of the same ideas, though it seemed more interested in the 1920s aesthetic and a sort of romanticised Prohibition-era slugfest, without any real awareness of the wider societal conditions that might create the situations depicted in the game. It also lacked depth in the political and economic engines, relying on its admittedly impressive XCOM-style combat, but providing a very surface-level approach to the business management side of things. Instead, Anton and Strangelet wanted to really think logically about how to create a system that correctly reflects the ebbs and flows of wealth, power and violence inherent to organised crime in a modern setting, as per this from our conversation. At first I wasn't sure if organised crime could provide enough material that could be turned into game mechanics, but I'd become curious about the subject and got myself a copy of Organised Crime, a college textbook written by Professor Howard Abedinsky. Reading the book prompted me to think about organised crime through a more sociological lens. Not only is organised crime a subject that can be used to provide social commentary, it also provides a kind of metaphor of capital, motivated by profit, utterly remorseless, constantly trying to consolidate its power through politics and force. This level of research and focus is reflected in the approach to the game, leaving moral judgment behind and instead focusing on a more sociological approach to the subject. More interested in the criminological explanations for crime than the oversimplified law and order spiel we are fed by what passes for political parties in the UK and US. Indeed, one suspects that the fire and brimstone used by law and order politicians is often fed by them measuring our behaviours by their own fickle and flexible principles. Though to be fair, if the general population truly behaved as unhinged and selfishly as our politicians, it would be like the purge every day. The interesting question, after all, isn't why someone chooses to commit a crime, but rather, why do you not commit crimes? It is this intellectual curiosity that underpins the open gameplay, that offers options without trying to force any kind of right or wrong. As Anton puts it, by putting the player in the shoes of a criminal, I'm hoping to make them understand how crime develops into a self-perpetuating force that is sustained by societal and material conditions. There's a saying that every society gets the kind of criminals it deserves. Put in another way, criminals are dark reflections of the society they inhabit. Instead of focusing on the individual, I wanted to explore the mafias and street gangs as self-regulating systems. The choices you are given when setting out your stall as a wannabe kingpin are many, and although there are purely mechanical reasons for taking different paths in terms of your character development, the actions you take and the industries you choose to pursue, there are definitely moments that strike you as being a little more internally important. One of those for me was when I got to choose my first principle for my organisation, and had hovered over a selection that contained the word gentrification. In giving me that option, Strangelet Games are challenging me to decide what I value and what route I want to take. Or perhaps more accurately, what measures am I prepared to take to succeed? Is my success coming at the cost of others' misery? Is it to be prioritised above all other concerns? Interestingly, All in the Game does a pretty good job of balancing a non-judgmental and abstracted relationship with reality, whilst also trying to ensure that we do not forget that the decisions we take in the game do affect people's lives in both direct and indirect ways. Anton confirms that this was a concern throughout development, when talking about the potential for adding further socio-political mechanics into the game, and whether a 100% accurate approach was preferable to a sensitive one. The implementation needs to be done with tact and consideration for the disenfranchised. The game used to feature sex workers and undocumented labour as resources, but I felt uncomfortable in the way the mechanics ended up treating those vulnerable demographics as commodities, so I dropped that idea. Speaking of the potential to ignore or exacerbate the plight of vulnerable people, it's probably important that we talk about the police, yeah? Rather than the police being a playable faction or an AI antagonist actively working against you on the city map, playing out the traditional cat and mouse game, they are instead represented as a sort of soft power, another layer that affects the effectiveness of your activities. This makes sense to me, since unlike the criminal enterprises they are up against, the police are an institution, a systemic barrier as opposed to a collection of personalities that have any real agency in determining police strategy. They also rarely chase criminals anymore if the complaints on my local Facebook groups are to be believed. I guess they really are on the slide. If you laughed at that, then you have no right to judge me. When I put the question to Anton as to their approach to policing in the game, they said this: policing has been heavily abstracted so that it won't get in the way of the gameplay, acting more as a deterrent to overexpansion rather than a truly serious threat to the player's existence. Incidentally, this is how things are in the real life as well, as policing is just putting a band-aid on a bigger problem. Again, this sociological understanding of the forces that shape society plays out in a way that allows the player to focus on the fun parts of running a criminal empire, and to get more invested in the multiplayer aspects of the game, facing off against rival organisations and strategising against those with similar options to yourself. It also acknowledges a fact that the police forces accept themselves, that they are a service that is fundamentally incapable of stopping or even significantly reducing crime, and that they ultimately will only pursue the crimes that are largely committed by the working classes. Alright, they probably won't accept the last part, but that doesn't make it not true. For all these reasons, all in the game creates a space for the police away from the main action. It creates an environment where the only barriers to success are your own choices and those of your competitors. As Anton reminds us, criminal organisations can be seen as the natural endpoint of a free market capitalist ethos. I mean, if you want a truly free market, you can't have any less regulation than none, right? Speaking of a lack of regulations, I did briefly ask Anton about their views on what it is like to work in the video game industry as a leftist, and the answer had a sad sense of inevitability to it. While my country is extensively unionised and there is a lot of working class solidarity, the class consciousness of people working in the gaming industry is somewhat lacking. If you want to succeed, especially in other countries with poor social safety nets, you'll have to get lucky or find yourself an investor, be it a creditor, a publisher or a shareholder. It might be your only way of staying afloat, but it will also tie you to the terms set by the investors, and we have all seen where that can lead us. Crunch culture, toxic workplaces, poor contract terms and unrealistic expectations. And it is this conundrum of how we make left projects more viable, visible and successful in a capitalist world that has led both to this video and to my involvement in We Create Together. In a system that relies on capital to oil the wheels of production, the creative classes will always struggle to overcome that initial hurdle. But we have a secret weapon that runs entirely contrary to the every person for themselves approach of the capitalist. And that is solidarity. Yes, I know. Left solidarity is often the punchline of our own jokes about our ability to fragment faster than a Cybertruck's welds, but there is no getting past the fact that our greatest potential lies in our ability to pool our skills, experience and resources for the betterment of the wider whole. And yes, I did say wider whole. The heart wants what it wants. If we truly want to grow the left and enable large-scale changes to the world before the capitalists turn it into a burning desert, we need to build up our media and businesses and provide alternatives to the soulless profit engines of the neoliberal 21st century. All in the game might not be about the emancipation of the working class or left solidarity. But its themes, structures, and the reality within which it is being created all talk of why we need those things more than ever. And to not address them at all would be the real crime. All in the Game has so much potential, so much depth, and such a different view on crime and society that I feel it deserves to be talked about. Yes, I am biased as a lefty, of course I am. I would like to see indie developers like Strangelet do well, and to have games with decent messaging and theory competing with the big studio releases that soak up all the money and change nothing for the better. I should have put a clip of Stephanie Stirling here, shouldn't I?
The major titles released by large publishers such as Activision, which faces severe allegations of systemic abuse, or Ubisoft, which faces severe allegations of systemic abuse.
How many games do we really need Ubisoft to make about climb tower, find camp, kill baddies, repeat? We need different voices, different points of view, and different creative visions to stop the monotonous charge of ray tracing third-person shooters and sequels that just change the year and a couple of skins. That's where game devs like Strangelet come in. Between the sheer number of strategies, upgrades, win conditions, and economic possibilities, there is so much scope for different play experience in All in the Game. Whether it be as a drug lord, growing, manufacturing and distributing narcotics, a dodgy real estate tycoon renting out dodgy apartments to off-the-book tenants, or as a violent enforcer shaking down the business nerds doing those first two things, you can play in your style. You can see from the generous amount of time given to me and my tiny YouTube channel by game dev Anton that there is a real passion to this project and an intelligence and forethought to its design. In fact, if there is one thing to take away from this video, it's to ignore all my ramblings about sociology and politics, and instead listen to Anton themselves describing their intent when making All in the Game. To be perfectly honest, my primary goal is to simply make a good, engaging video game, as without that, any message I hope to impart will not resonate with the players. Strangelet want to make a good game that is fun to play, and that, in this day and age, and in this industry, is a statement in itself. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and will consider giving the video a like and subscribe to help give it the YouTube fuel it needs to get out to more people. I want to say a big thanks to Anton for being a great sport and for sparing the time to answer a whole bunch of questions that I fired at them when they're understandably very busy trying to finish their game. Thanks also go out to Mrs. InsideLeft, who has helped with the script and kept me sane when the day job was trying to do the opposite. Big shout out to the We Create Together crew for their ongoing support, inspiration and advice. Check out the Blue Sky and email details in the description if you would like to get involved with us. If you're on the left and you make something, whether it's noise, scribbles, iFood, words, or well, pretty much anything really, maybe you should join our little community. I'll add links to the YouTube channels of a bunch of WCT contributors in the description too, so if you need another video after this one, give them a shot. Thanks again for watching and supporting Left Media. See you soon. Goodbye.